I want to clear something up before we begin. Oh my god, I've wanted to clear this up for years. You'll notice that as the review begins, I talk a lot about what James Rolfe had to say on the reception of this film. So many people heard this and got pissed off at me for what I said, saying like, wow, way to stick it to James Rolfe, you dickhead. So let me be very clear. People emailed me with a quote from James Rolfe's review. What I was responding to was my belief that they were taking his quote out of context and oversimplifying the matter. I was responding to those people, not James Rolfe. What James was saying is that you can find problems like the ones people had with Spider-Man 3 in any film. And he's right. He's absolutely right. I think you can find the exact same problems people had with Suicide Squad in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Exactly the same. People don't mind them in that case because they feel that Guardians of the Galaxy was better executed. I don't think it was, but the overwhelming majority of people on planet Earth and the whole universe do. Just saying, well, you can find fault with anything is not an airtight defense, and I don't think that James was saying it was, but I think the people who emailed me with that quote thought that's what he was saying, and that's what I was responding to. Never did I intend to throw James Rolfe under the bus. Oh, man, it feels good to get that out finally. Okay, so on to my favorite part of the review. I've made a massive fuck ton of mistakes doing Confused Matthew, but the one in this review was my absolute favorite. Criticizing the film for giving Kirsten Dunst an obviously different singing voice, only to find out that it was, in fact, her voice. Everyone who heard this when the review premiered was like, man, do your research next time. And I'm like, no, then we wouldn't have this hilarious fuck-up. Of course this fuck-up could have easily been avoided if I had just looked up who did the singing voice, but the voice sounded so distinctly different to me that I didn't think it was necessary. Incidentally, I did make a habit after this of looking into those things before I did reviews, and still managed to fuck things up, so, what are you gonna do? I could have taken that part down, edited the mistake out, and then proceeded from there, but no. This kind of hilarious fuck-up needs to be preserved for all time. I criticized her singing voice for not sounding like her voice when it was her voice. Classic. As for the majority of the review that I didn't fuck up, yeah, the badness of this movie doesn't seem to be much disputed these days. Spider-Man 3 does have some defenders, but most people see it as the eyesore of the franchise. That along with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. The last time I saw this film is when I was reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I disliked it just as much then as I did the first time I saw it, so it really hasn't incurred any love for me over the years. This review was fun. It was the first time that I used video footage and edited it very badly, but I was trying, and still am. I still like the girl-seeking crane bit. The whole fact that Spider-Man left before stopping the crane is still hilarious. It's one of my favorite later reviews. So, enjoy.
You know his words will get you farther than the film will ever go. Give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you what's wrong with the show. He knows what's good, what's bad, what's really bad. His face is just a sign. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
A funny thing happened when I put this film on my list to review. A large amount of emails came into my inbox telling me not to review this film, and instead to watch James Rolfe's review, which they felt would eliminate my need to review this film at all. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it, James's review was a defense of this film, and I've posted a link to it for anyone who wants to hear the opposite side of my views, as his is probably the best defense of this film out there. Along with the recommendation that I watch the James review, those who sent the suggestion also attached the exact same argument from that review. I'm serious, there was no exception. They all did this. Now, I am by no means chastising James for how he feels about this film, nor is this a review of his review. I am simply responding to the argument given to me numerous times by his viewers. That argument is that no movie is perfect, and no matter what they did with this one, people would still have found something to complain about. My response to this is, yes, that's true of any film, and that can be used to defend any film, whether it's Weekend at Bernie's or Howard the Duck. But, and I don't mean to give offense when I say that this argument is a straw man. No one hated or complained about this film because it wasn't perfect. We hated it and complained about it because it wasn't good. Reviewing Spider-Man 3 gives me the same problem I had reviewing the Star Wars prequels. So much has been said about this one that it makes it really difficult to say anything new. In fact, videos such as the parody from How It Should Have Ended, which I have also posted a link to, have made me seriously question whether I need to say anything about this film at all. But the pages and pages of requests have practically demanded that I say something, and as always, there are many bad aspects of this film that people seem to miss. So without further ado, here it is. The film opens to Peter Parker narrating about what's been going on since the last film. This narration is actually one of the chief complaints among critics and fans, but to be honest, I don't really understand why. The last film had narration in the beginning, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I think I remember the first one having that too, so I was kind of expecting it. No, the narration at the beginning didn't bother me, but this sure as shit did.
They say that falling in love is wonderful. It's wonderful. So they say.
That doesn't sound a damn thing like her. I mean, maybe if we had never heard this character speak before, they might have gotten away with this, but we're so used to Mary Jane's voice by now that we know it's not her voice coming out. Whoever it is pretty damn good, though. So after this show ends, Peter confronts Harry. Harry learned that Peter was Spider-Man in the last film, and is now thinking about revenge. So then we see him stepping into the same chamber that gave his father superpowers, and we see that it gives him superpowers too. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this superpower-giving machine have the unfortunate side effect of making you crazy and unstable? So why didn't that happen to Harry? Anyway, we then cut to a scene of Peter and Mary Jane confessing their love for one another when a meteor just happens to crash near them and a big black blob attaches itself to Peter's scooter. After this, we are then introduced to Flint Marko, who has to be the most lackluster villain of recent years. For all of his being big, brutish, and gruff, Marko is a complete wimp. And as we will see, the only thing we're ever going to know about this guy is that he has a sick daughter. Oh, I'm sorry. There's also one more thing we find out about him.
Not a bad person.
Apparently the writers of this film think the audience to be so stupid that we wouldn't possibly figure out this guy is supposed to be not really a bad person unless they make him say he isn't really a bad person in dialogue. This character and all the story arcs that go with him are absolutely pathetic. They could have told a real heartfelt story about a guy who had bad luck his whole life, but wants to do something good and turn it around. Instead, we're told once that he's not really a bad person, and then he just runs around with a dumb expression on his face for the rest of the film. That's not a character. That's time filler. So meanwhile, Peter goes to Aunt May's apartment and tells her he's going to ask Mary Jane to marry him. This begins one of the only attempts made by this film to have a heartfelt moment between two characters. The problem with this is that the scene was just badly handled. First off, the dialogue is bad. It's just a lot of inane rambling on the part of Aunt May. She gives Peter the story of Uncle Ben's proposal to her while giving every single detail about the event, no matter how small and unimportant.
We were very good swimmers, and it was a beautiful day, and he said, "Let's swim to the island." And at the island, we found a perfect spot by an old tree, and we lay down and looked up at the sky. And then he said, "Close your eyes, May." And I did. And then he said, "Open." And I did.
So then it was time for us to go. So I opened the car door, got into the car, closed the door, put my foot on the brake pedal, turned the key, put it in gear, and accelerated whilst turning the wheel in a left or right manner depending on which direction I wanted to go. The second problem here is that Peter has absolutely nothing to contribute to this conversation. I mean, the character has virtually no dialogue at all in this scene. They could have had poor Aunt May delivering these lines in an empty room and it wouldn't have made that much difference. So as Peter leaves, he is then attacked by the new goblin. I have to admit, this scene was actually really cool to watch in the theater. But then we get one of the most gut-wrenching, sickening, intelligence-insulting plot threads I've ever seen. The butler telling Harry that Spider-Man didn't really kill his father at the end of this film has nothing on this.
Hey, buddy.
Hey. Hit my head.
That's right. Harry has amnesia. Yes, you heard me right. Amnesia. The biggest soap opera cop-out in the history of writing. It's at this moment during the writing process that someone should have said, you know what? Spider-Man is a pretty big franchise. We could probably save 1 or even 5 of these plots for the next film. Instead, they cram all this incoherent and unrelated crap into the film, and by this point, someone said, you know, we've still got the Sandman, Venom, Peter and Mary Jane's problems, the annoying Eddie Brock and the police chief and his daughter for some reason to deal with. There's no way we can do the New Goblin right now, so let's just give Harry a wang on the head and give him amnesia. Then we'll stick him in the corner until we need him again, and then his amnesia will wear off. At first I thought they were giving him amnesia for a purpose. He can't remember that Peter killed his father, and he and Peter are friends again. So now Peter has to make a choice between having his friend or telling him the truth. But of course not. No good writing in this film. The amnesia is just a convenience for the plot. What the hell did they take us for? So now that they have Harry doped up and stuck in the corner, they're now free to go to something totally unrelated, but just as contrived. Mary Jane comes to Peter upset over a bad review. She touts an uncharacteristically bitchy attitude which is tried to be explained away by the fact that the bad review reminds her of her abusive father. But I still can't see it as anything more than forcing problems on these two. Anyway, before Peter can really console her, the police monitor reports an out-of-control crane. Yeah, we've all heard about New York's problems with cranes that are on top of buildings for no apparent reason going out of control, right? The crane inches its way towards the building, traveling at about 1 mile per hour, and still manages to take out one of the levels. I guess it must be made of titanium from Krypton or something, I guess. Anyway, it makes its way back again and takes out the bottom floor, causing a girl to slide down the floor and hold on for dear life at the bottom. Her father, the police chief, shows up, along with Eddie Brock, who dated her one time. Then it is revealed that the out-of-control crane is also a girl-seeking crane, as it now comes up the building and heads right for her. The girl falls, and after a few flashy moves, Spider-Man catches her, exchanges a few words with her and Eddie Brock, and then goes away. Hey, where are you going? The crane's still out of control. Didn't you come here to stop the crane? No, he didn't come here to stop the crane. He came here for the sole purpose of giving 2 irrelevant characters a few minutes of screen time. I'll tell you, this is great quality writing so far.
You are such a nerd.
Welcome to part 2. Mistakes. We all make them, and now I'm forced to correct one. I said at the beginning of part 1 that the singing voice coming out of Kirsten Dunst didn't sound a damn thing like her. I stand by that statement, but that does not change the fact that it actually was her. The voice you are hearing is all Dunst. Now, ironically, my first criticism in this review has turned into an unintentional compliment. I was so taken aback both by how different and how good her singing voice sounded that I honestly didn't think it was her. All I can say in my feeble defense is, that's why I'm not a music critic. Kudos to you, Kirsten. In this shitstorm of a terrible film, you are clearly not the problem. So at this point in the film, we find Flint Marko doing the only thing he really ever does in this film, running around with a dumb expression on his face. The police chase him to a small, easy-to-get-over chain-link fence in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, this guy take the west side, this guy take the east. Lord knows you can't just jump over the fence after him. Reminds me of the Vogons in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now the next complaint about this scene is so common it's barely even worth mentioning anymore. All I have to say is, if NASA detected something walking below one of the rockets before takeoff, I hope to God they wouldn't just assume it's a bird. So now the Sandman has sand powers. Wow, that's menacing. And he's off to run around with a dumb expression on his face as a clump of sand now. Meanwhile, Peter meets Eddie Brock for the first time, and they both find themselves competing for a staff job. Now, I like Topher Grace. I know a lot of people don't, but I think he's a fine actor. Unfortunately, he's all wrong for the part of Eddie Brock. It was my understanding that this character, as written, is supposed to be slick and slimy, but despite his best efforts, Grace just doesn't make the character come off as anything but obnoxious. Anyway, Jameson tells them both that the first person to get him a picture of Spider-Man doing something illegal will get the staff job. So then Peter and Harry dick around in a scene that does nothing but make the running time a little longer, and then we move on to Mary Jane being told she's being let go from her acting job. Apparently she was panned by all the critics in town. Now, personally, I don't buy this at all. It's just another example of the writers force-feeding the characters problems so they can bitch about them later. The first review Mary Jane got complained that her small voice didn't carry past the first row, but, well, perhaps another demonstration.
I can't recall who said it. I know I never read it. I only know they tell me that love is grand.
I'm sorry, small voice or no small voice, if she could sing like that, there would be no bad reviews, let alone all bad reviews. When we hear in this scene the girl that's going to replace her, we realize that she isn't a better singer, she just adds a little more flavor to the song. And if the directors wanted more flavor, well, that's something that should have been worked out in the auditioning process in the first place. The whole conflict just feels unnatural and contrived. Speaking of unnatural and contrived, we then cut to a scene of a parade in honor of Spider-Man. Mary Jane shows up, but decides not to burden Peter with her recent layoff. Meanwhile, Flip Marko is walking around with a dumb expression on his face when he gets recognized by two police officers. They begin to chase after him when he runs behind what has got to be the only truck full of sand within a 10-mile radius. It didn't have concrete or cinder blocks in it, it had specifically sand. How fucking convenient. So the two cops, who are totally unaware that Marko is able to turn into sand, take off the tarp over the truck. Then God makes a shovel materialize in one of the cops' hands, and he gets up on the truck to dig him out. 'Cause, you know, he can breathe down there. He's not just gonna come up on his own. So the contrived excuse to put special effects in this scene pays off, and the Sandman bursts forth from the convenient truck full of sand and then flies away. Meanwhile, Peter is ready to make his debut in the parade. He comes swinging in and does a few tricks for the audience when the audience begins egging him on to kiss the girl on stage. Here we have the most out-of-character moment in the entire film. A moment that sacrifices every established character trait Peter has to make room for more artificial problems.
Go ahead, lay one on me.
Really?
Yeah, they'll love it.
All right.
Why the fucking hell would Peter be so stupid and bastardly as to kiss another girl right in front of Mary Jane, who he's fought his ass off for 2 films to finally be with? Why? I mean, maybe there's a good explanation. Maybe he just didn't think she'd be looking.
I'm gonna be swinging in from over there.
Oh, yeah.
So you know where to look.
Okay, new theory. This movie sucks. So after this scene, we then leap to Peter trying to propose to Mary Jane. Now, there's an in-joke in this scene revolving around a French waiter, but it's never really funny. It's more just bizarre. Anyway, Mary Jane shows up when those pesky, contrived, and out-of-character problems come up, and Mary Jane leaves in a disappointed fit. The scene can be summed up this way. Peter tries to be reasonable, while Mary Jane reacts unreasonably. What makes this scene tedious in retrospect is that it never amounts to anything, and I'll tell you why. After this scene, we get another soap opera reveal that the man who killed Peter's uncle didn't really kill his uncle, Flint Marko did. Dun dun dun. So at home, Mary Jane shows up, completely putting the restaurant scene behind her, and tries to be there for Peter. This scene can be summed up this way. Mary Jane tries to be reasonable, while Peter reacts unreasonably. So which is it? Which established plot point are we supposed to be following here? Who's in the wrong, Peter or Mary Jane? We've had 2 scenes back to back, each establishing the exact opposite thing. So which one are we supposed to take to heart? This is yet another sign, to put it mildly, that this film needed a serious trimming down. Anyway, Peter then goes to sleep that night when the black suit finally attaches itself to him, and he decides to use his new powers to track down Marco. Eventually he finds him walking around in the sewers for reasons that are never quite explained, as always with a dumb expression on his face. Now, you'd think this would be the moment where Marco finally emerges as a character and adds something to the story, but no. The two just fight for a little while until Marco crumbles in a pool of water. I'm starting to notice a pattern here. Characters and plot threads are introduced only for the writers to get them out of the way to make room for something else, which is in turn set up to be gotten out of the way to make room for something else. Lather, rinse, repeat. So after this, we find Mary Jane lonely, and she decides to pay a visit to Harry. Now, I just want to say, if they had focused on 1 or 2 of these plot threads and built a story around them, rather than just piling them on without coherence, Spider-Man 3 could have been a truly great film. Instead, we have to watch scenes like this. Sorry you had to see that. Hey, here's an idea. Instead of wasting precious screen time making us watch these two cook food in the kitchen and dance around like dorks, why don't you try putting a good story together?
You are such a nerd.
Welcome to part 3. So after their little dance, Mary Jane and Harry have a chat when Harry steals a kiss. And that makes this one of the most irrelevant scenes ever to not end up on the cutting room floor. It's never going to come up again, Peter and Mary Jane are never going to talk about this. What's this doing in the film? So then Mary Jane leaves in a fit, and now that we've blown through a few other plot threads, we can now get back to Harry, whose amnesia conveniently wears off. So here's what he does. He returns to Mary Jane and tells her that if she wants Peter to live, she has to do what he says. So here's what she does. She meets with Peter and tells him that their relationship is over. Peter blubbers about this for a while, and Harry looks upon this with a glow of satisfaction. Hey, guess what, Mary Jane? Your boyfriend is Spider-Man! What makes you think Harry is even capable of killing him? Not only that, but Peter is going up against superpowered weirdos all the time. It's kind of part of the job. If you honestly think a superpower-wielding person like Harry is a threat to Peter's life, why have you never even had a problem with Peter being Spider-Man before now? The secret word of the day is contrived. So after the audience has been manipulated into thinking that Mary Jane would agree to something like this, we then cut to a scene of Harry fucking with Peter at a restaurant, telling him that he's the other man in Mary Jane's life. So Peter goes to get his black suit and returns to kick Harry's ass. He's just about to leave when Harry picks up a grenade and chucks it at Peter, who grabs it, throws it back, and blows Harry up in the face. This scene was designed to show how Peter is losing control and doing bad things. The problem is, that never happens. Throwing a grenade at Harry is a good thing. Harry is trying to kill Peter. He's been trying to kill Peter in every scene he's been in. He tried to kill Peter in this scene. Twice. Try again, guys. Throwing a grenade at Harry is not bad. So after bringing Harry back into the film only to get him out of the way again, Peter struts down the street when he spots an unfavorable picture of Spider-Man in the Bugle taken by Eddie Brock. He recognizes the photo as a fake, so he confronts Eddie, calls him trash, and threatens to expose both he and the picture for the fakes that they are. Eddie responds by calling him a Boy Scout and asks, "When are you going to give a guy a break?" Peter then violently shoves him against the wall and tells him, "If you want forgiveness, get religion." Thanks, Peter. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for a break. So Peter does expose the picture as a fake, and Eddie Brock gets fired. This scene was once again designed to show how Peter is losing control and doing bad things, and once again, it doesn't happen. turning Brock in was a good thing. His picture was a fake, and he was dishonest. If Peter never got the black suit, isn't turning Brock in something that he would have done anyway? Yes sirree, Bob. Try again, guys. Turning Brock in is not bad. So after this, we roll into a montage of Peter strutting down the street, annoying people, and pretty much just acting like a dork. Now, I have no problem with the filmmakers trying to inject comedy into this film. The problem is, it's the wrong kind of comedy. This is something that belongs in a parody. It does not belong in a film like this. So now that they've gotten a few more things out of the way, the Sandman conveniently re-emerges. Meanwhile, Peter takes a girl to a nightclub where he knows Mary Jane is working as a waitress. As Mary Jane is the one who broke his heart after being manipulated in ways that make absolutely no sense, Peter finally gets his revenge by dancing around the room. Yeah, that showed her. Eventually his date leaves and things get a little heated between he and Mary Jane when finally he accidentally wheels around and punches her in the face. This jogs for him the fact that he should probably lose the suit, so he goes to a church and tries to take it off where Eddie Brock, and absolutely no one else, just happens to be at the time. Looks like he took Peter's small, insignificant comment about finding religion literally. He kneels down, introduces himself to God, and very casually and politely asks God to kill Peter Parker. First of all, I think you've mistaken God for Don Corleone. Second, how did you go from douche to murderer all of a sudden? Peter loses you your job and you want him dead? You're not just gonna, I don't know, start out a little smaller, like maybe asking God to lose Peter his job? Oh no, that's right. People wanting people dead is bad, and Brock is a bad guy. Never mind if he would actually want Peter dead, the plot needs him to be that bad, so he is. So Eddie gets the suit and then tracks down the Sandman and strikes a deal with him. He tells him, look, I want Spider-Man dead, you want Spider-Man dead, let's work together. So, hang on, did I miss something here? When did the Sandman want Spider-Man dead? He didn't. But the plot needs him to now, so the Sandman agrees. As usual, an elaborate trap is set up using Mary Jane as bait. Peter has to try to save her, but he can't do it alone, so he goes to Harry for help. Harry tells him to take a hike, and afterwards his butler approaches him and gives him information that would have saved everyone a lot of time and trouble, and even have saved lives if he had just opened his mouth a few films ago. So Spider-Man shows up at the trap and gets wailed on by these two until Harry shows up to help. Now, having these two work together as friends would have been a great climax if there had been a legitimate building to this point, but it's just tossed in there after so much convoluted garbage. Anyway, eventually Harry gets impaled, and Peter learns that the tones made by a bunch of metal pipes will disrupt the symbiote. So he traps it in a cage of pipes and yanks Eddie out of the suit. Eddie sees Peter about to destroy it, and he leaps toward the plot-triggered grenade. I say plot-triggered because these grenades apparently do only as much damage as the plot requires them to. The exact same grenade that just messed up Harry's face a little bit is the same grenade that incinerates both Eddie and the symbiote in one shot. So after this, the Sandman approaches Peter and starts confessing what happened the night his uncle was killed. He tells Peter that he knows he's done bad things and that he doesn't expect forgiveness. Peter then comes back with, I've done bad things too. No, you haven't. You haven't done bad things at all. Throwing a grenade at Harry was a good thing, turning Brock in was a good thing, punching Mary Jane in the face was bad but an accident, and everything else was just you acting like a super dork. The only thing you've done bad in this film was dance. You can't have it both ways. Putting the suit on either made Peter bad or it made him funny. You made him funny, you don't get to make him say, I've done bad things too. So Peter forgives him, and the Sandman just floats away. So did he ever help his daughter or not? Way to resolve things, guys. So Harry dies, Peter and Mary Jane get back together, and that's it. Nothing really resolves because there wasn't anything legitimate to resolve. The writers just built a house of cards just to knock it down so they could build it right back up again. The Spider-Man franchise is not a franchise that I hate. I didn't like the first Spider-Man, but it wasn't terrible, and Spider-Man 2 was one of the best films of the last 5 years. Spider-Man 3 just sunk in an inescapable quicksand of special effects and bad writing. We're now hearing reports of a Spider-Man 4 in the works, and I don't dread this at all. Spider-Man 3 was god-awful, but I'm holding out hope that it was just a rare misstep. Maybe they just got overconfident, and after this film's failure, they finally learned from their mistakes. I certainly hope so. But whatever they do with 4, please, no more dancing. The end.
You are such a nerd.